In 1939, novelist and social critic Thomas Mann wrote an essay reckoning with Hitler's evil, titled "That Man is My Brother," and then retitled to just Brother Hitler. As a great colleague of mine put it, Thomas Mann did not place Hitler in a moral quarantine. Here are Mann's own words about Hitler. "A brother, a rather unpleasant and mortifying brother. He makes me nervous. The relationship is painful to a degree, but I will not disclaim it." Thomas Mann is insisting on this basic, shocking, profound term of belonging. A brother, a sister, a sibling. But it's important that he's not doing two things. First, he is not doing guilt by association, mass guilt by association. He is doing responsibility by association. And second, he is not denying that Hitler is radical evil. Rather, he is saying, look, let's not face evil with our back to it. Instead, let's sit there and ask ourselves, look, even though I am not to blame, how am I responsible for this? And now watch this. Thomas Mann, in a later lecture from 1945 called Germany and the Germans, brings himself personally into this collective responsibility.
Not a word of all that I have just told you about Germany or tried to indicate to you came out of alien, cool, objective knowledge. It is all within me. I have been through it all.
I have been through it all. A moving, personal confession of intellectual, cultural, psychological responsibility.
There are not two Germanys, a good one and a bad one, but only one, whose best turned into evil through devilish cunning. Wicked Germany is merely good Germany gone astray. Good Germany in misfortune, in guilt and ruin. For that reason it is quite impossible for one born there simply to renounce the wicked, guilty Germany, and to declare, I am the good, the noble, the just Germany in the white robe. I leave it to you to exterminate the wicked one.
Mann is saying, I want you to recognize that Hitler is as German as Beethoven and Goethe. And Mann would want Russians to recognize that Putin is just as Russian as Tolstoy and Tarkovsky. Have a look at this. A Russian taking full ownership of responsibility for the attack on Ukraine several days after the war started. It's the dissident Michail Khodorkovsky.
Я не знаю, что вам сказать, кроме простите. Простите.
I want to tell you how I am a part of this. I grew up in the Soviet Union. I didn't live in Russia, but I'm from there. And as Western as I am, Russia is a part of my identity. And Russian culture has historically failed to get its act together politically and produce a politics that's comparable in sophistication to the cultural output that Russia has given Europe over the last couple of centuries. Moreover, Russia has missed every democratic opportunity that's come its way in the last 140 years. In that period, I count 4. And because these opportunities were missed, Ukraine, Russia's closest neighbor, got attacked. And people in Europe are being killed, they're being made homeless, and they're being made to feel unsafe in their own country. And if Russia had taken its last democratic opportunity in 1999, this wouldn't have happened. If Russia had taken its penultimate democratic opportunity in 1991, this wouldn't have happened. It's a long-distance political failure of a culture that I'm associated with, and I feel it. But why are so many Russians struggling to take responsibility? In other videos, we've already looked at a couple of reasons. One's that if you speak your mind, you now go to jail. The second is the radical depoliticization of Russian society. Russians are not citizens, but a kind of population living on a shared territory, a population that's outsourced its politics and instead just prioritized and focused on personal subsistence. But there is another cause, another pattern that we haven't talked about yet, and we need to. It's when people strive to be morally good in a narrow sphere, but in a wider sphere, they are completely morally absent. It's not an accident that I mentioned my great colleague Avishai Margalit at the beginning of this video, because he will help us understand this better.
I make a distinction here between human thin relation and human thick relation. My attitude to my family is thick. To stranger, I have thin relations. And then I make the following distinction. Ethics is what regulate thick relations, friendship, love, and so on. Morality is what regulate thin relations, the attitude to strangers that you don't know or don't meet. Many people don't see the constraints that morality should put on ethics. They believe that to be ethical is not to be selfish. You are willing to sacrifice for your tribe, your nation, your religious order. I belong, and we are in thick relation. People usually are attached to the people to whom they think they belong. Yeah. And the point is, what about the people who don't belong?
Right. This is happening all over the world, but it's worse in Russia. And you can see it in the Vox Pop videos you can watch on YouTube of Russians who give you the impression that they would travel for a couple of hours at night across the city to bring food to a friend in need, but are at the same time willfully oblivious to what is going on in Bucha or in Mariupol. People have the feeling that as long as they make their thick world a better place, their thin world doesn't really matter. This can hurt others, but it can also hurt you, because ignoring the thin world won't stop it from coming and knocking on your door and perhaps knocking your thick world down. And slowly, Russians are beginning to find out what that's like with the unfolding of the devastating effects of the sanctions regime. Now, if this is the wrong way to balance thick and thin, what's the right way to do it? Let's get personal here about something you really can't do. And that's that you can't take on ethically people who are strangers 5,000 miles away from you, like you take on people you love. Some utilitarian thinkers, like Peter Singer, want to persuade you that that's possible, that you can make your thin world as important as your thick. But one of the problems with all of these thinkers is that they can't take their own ideas seriously. So let's try to take them seriously for them and see what happens. Imagine feeling all the suffering of all human beings equally vividly. Imagine taking on the lives of strangers like you take on the lives of loved ones. This is how philosopher Bernard Williams thought it would make you feel.
What would it be like to take on every piece of suffering at a given moment any creature is undergoing? It would be an ultimate horror, an unendurable nightmare.
And this is the course of action Williams thought you'd want to take if you were in that situation.
Then surely we would annihilate the planet if we could. And if other planets containing conscious creatures are similar to ours in the suffering they contain, we would annihilate them as well.
So if this kind of inhuman impartiality is nonsense, what is left? It's part of a sound ethical life that you expand your sympathy to strangers. As long as you do it without this bizarre, impartial, overly demanding, nightmarish utilitarian ideal we've just mentioned. So what does this mean in practice in terms of what we ask of Russians? I think it means three things. First, please understand that we're not telling you what to do. We're telling you to listen to the voice inside you that might tell you what to do. We're not even telling you to be responsible. We're telling you to explore being more receptive to a form of responsibility that you might discover inside yourself. 2, even if you oppose the war, you are still responsible. Just like a protester against the Vietnam War would be responsible for Nixon's Christmas bombing of Hanoi, which was a moral crime. 3, and it's worse than just 1 and 2, because there is another challenge you gotta face. It's not just that you're thin is kind of missing, it's that you're thick, your sense of your own group is too narrow. It doesn't include fellow Russians who are your fellow citizens, because your understanding is that you live on a shared territory and not on a shared civic space. And that's a big problem that we're seeing now when we notice that people in Moscow and people in Petersburg are kind of protected from the war because soldiers aren't being drawn from these cities. Coffins aren't coming back by and large to these cities. Instead, all of that is happening with outer regions of Russia, with many ethnic minorities mobilized for the war. And because there is a lack of a civic belonging, all of these others who are fighting the war to folks in Petersburg and Moscow just feel like they're part of some kind of thin circle that doesn't matter. Now, as our mention of Nixon shows, we can't have this conversation without talking about ourselves. So we got to talk. Mann wasn't just talking about Germany. He was talking about the capacity of cultures to bring out the worst or the best in their inhabitants. So there is a French lesson here. There is a British lesson here. There is an American lesson here. So let's talk about this. The lesson is, do not divide your country into good and bad simplistically, but rather try to say, it is within me. It is all within me. There is only one of your country, not two, no matter how divided it is. We, in the West, have stopped taking responsibility for political decisions that go against us because of how divided we are. We've stopped taking political responsibility for the follies of our opponents. I'd love to tell you this. If there is a leader, a political leader, who you despise because they stand against everything that you believe in, then please compete against them, fight against them, challenge, argue, but don't put them outside a circle such that you take zero responsibility for them. And then you've got to face this question. If this political leader stands against everything that you believe in, how come your culture produced them? And if you've got a ready-made answer in 2 minutes flat to that question, then you're wrong. The classic way of not taking responsibility, of saying, I've had it, it's not about me anymore, I am done, is to give up on politics. And there are plenty of okay reasons to give up on politics. If it's just bad for your mental health, or if you're working 70 hours a week and you have no energy for it, or if you are sailing or painting or doing philosophy and you just lead an aesthetic life, that can be okay. But it's not okay to give up on politics because politics has stopped working. Here is an important truth. Politics cannot stop working unless you end up in a rigidly authoritarian and potentially totalitarian society. But No Western country is anywhere near that state now. When you stop being interested in politics, it's not going to stop being interested in you. Russia is a good model for us of what not to be politically. Russians evacuated politics out of their lives. And to understand the horrendous consequences of that, watch this video next.